Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. Today in this halaqah, we are going to be with a great guest, with a brother, Charles. So welcome, Sheikh Charles, and thank you for joining us. So welcome, everyone. Welcome, brother Absalam. And we are going to wait the other brothers to join us. So really, today, everybody worried and has a problem to how to treat his kids or how to treat our children, especially in Islam. So today with Sheikh Charles, he is going to discuss in this halaqah, inshallah, how we can treat our kids or how we can educate our kids. Here you go, brother Charles. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be able to speak on this topic of raising children. And I have a little bit of experience on my own. I have a 3-year-old who's about to turn 4 here in a couple of months, inshallah. But also I've worked with, after having converted to Islam in college, I've worked with college students for the past decade or so, serving as a mentor and a guide. I served as the Muslim chaplain at the University of Richmond. So I've run the youth program at the Islamic Center of Virginia, and currently I'm running my own youth program that just started up about a week ago that I'm really excited about. And I gave this khutbah this past Friday because one of the things that I've noticed coming from college students and even Muslims in my generation is that there is oftentimes a tension that exists between young people and their parents. And a lot of this is rooted in, there's a lot of reasons why this might exist. Most of the Muslims that are my generation, and even those who are in college today, and a lot of the kids I deal with in youth group, their parents are first generation immigrants. They immigrated to this country from somewhere else. And we oftentimes take for granted that experience is actually a pretty traumatic one. It's hard for someone like me who was born and raised in this country to understand what it's like to completely uproot your life and move to another country that is vastly different than the country you were raised in, and then try and raise children in that society at the same time. There's a lot of fear and anxiety that goes through that process. But also, there's always kind of this stereotype of Muslim parents, whether they're Arab or they're South Asian, whatever it might be, as being very strict. I started my khutbah this past Friday talking about this new TV show that's out, featuring the first ever Muslim superhero in the Marvel comic universe. Her name is Miss Marvel. And the character's name is Kamala Khan, and she has a very normal, kind of typical story for Muslim teenagers these days. Her parents moved here from Pakistan. The show tells this wonderful story about the partition and the effects that had on the people there. And I remember watching it, and it's a great representation of what it's like to be Muslim in this country, especially being raised Muslim in this country by immigrant parents. But I remember one of the things that my wife and I laughed about is it does a great job representing the Muslim culture, but we were constantly thinking like, oh, there's no way that Kamala's parents would be that lenient, right? There's one episode in which Kamala sneaks out of her house and goes to this Comic-Con convention. She goes to this, what's called the Avenger Con. And she stays out late against her parents' wishes. And when she comes home, she crawls in through the window and her mom is sitting there. And her mom, pretty much just says, "I'm so disappointed in you." And she walks off. And we laugh. We say, no parent would be that lenient. And we can kind of laugh about that now. But it's indicative of kind of a culture where Muslim parents just tend to be more strict than non-Muslim parents in American society. That has its benefits, most certainly. But But the reason that I wanted to give this khutbah in this talk today is to remind us of the prophetic model of raising children. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had this methodology, he had this process, which is what made him so successful. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he received the prophecy, when he received the revelation, the commandment to go out and spread the word amongst his people, he didn't just go in the marketplace and start shouting at people, you know, this is what you have to believe, and if you don't believe it, you're going to hell, right? The Prophet ﷺ spent many years building relationships, and a lot of his success came not from the preaching that he did, though that was certainly impactful, but it was because the relationships that he built with people. It was the character that he exhibited. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Imran, and by the mercy of Allah, you, Muhammad, dealt with them gently. In Surah Al-Anbiya, he says, we have sent you, O Muhammad, but not as a mercy to all that exists. The Prophet ﷺ's demeanor was one of calmness. He was not one to frequently get angry or raise his voice. We have no indication that he ever yelled at children or ever struck children. In fact, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did get angry, right, it shocked his people because he had such a calm demeanor, and he was known as someone that was always in good spirits. Anas bin Malik, may Allah be pleased with him, once said the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the most merciful to people, even to his own family. And Abdullah bin Ibn al-Harith once said, I did not see anyone who smiled more than the messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the messenger had these qualities about him. He was the kind of person that you would call approachable. Everyone kind of knows, has met someone that the second you meet them, the way that they smile, the way that they talk to you, that you just feel like you can open up to them. And that's the character that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had. And that foundation allowed him to spread his message and to really touch people's hearts. The hadith that I think is the most important when it comes to parenting and when it comes to dealing with children, that I really find compelling, is one in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when it comes to raising your children, play with them for 7 years of their life, then teach them for the next 7 years, and then advise them for the next 7 years after that. So that takes care of 21 years of a child's life, right? And at 21 years, they ought to be able to go out into the world and pretty much figure out their way. So I kind of break these down into 3 stages. The first stage is to love. The second stage is to educate or to advise or to discipline. And the third phase is about equality. The Prophet ﷺ says, in this narration, he says to advise them. And in other ones, he says befriend them. And this is where you start to have this relationship with your child where you're giving them the flexibility and the autonomy to make their own decisions. And if you do the math, that starts around the age of 14 or 15, which can be kind of frightening to imagine, giving a teenager the ability to make decisions for themselves and try and provide them some guidance. But let's talk about the first phase of that first. That is, play with them for the first 7 years. So there's wisdom in this, right? And it's reflective of how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with his community, is that he didn't immediately receive the prophecy from Allah and start commanding Muslims or individuals to start doing things. He built up a love of the faith in their heart, and that love manifested itself in their limbs later on. It gave them the ability to restrict themselves from alcohol or from gambling or from promiscuous relationships. They already had that foundation and that love and that fear of Allah within them, that the commandment that came afterwards was a lot easier for them to follow through on. So the Prophet ﷺ advised that we love our children. And if you look at psychological studies in the field of child psychology, this has actually been proven to be the best way for children to develop. I was always raised with this notion, like you can't hold your child too much, or you can hold your child too much or you can hold them too little and then something will mess up, right? Well, now people are saying you cannot hold your child too much. Like you cannot give your child enough love. Psychologically, children develop much faster and much more wholesomely when they're developed in an environment of love. So, for example, children are more likely to learn lessons or learn things through play than they are, you would sit them down and read them a textbook, right? So if you go to a daycare or you go to a preschool, they don't have kids sitting at a desk reading from a book, right? Because that's not effective for them. They've got too much energy. They can't focus, right? But as soon as you take the lesson from the textbook and you turn it into a game, it snaps really quick for them and they pick it up very quickly. So again, this is another example in which the Prophet ﷺ shared with us wisdom that just today in the 20th and 21st century, we're starting to find scientific evidence to suggest that he was right, that he knew what he was talking about. So take the first 7 years to play with your children, to practically smother them in love. And then after that comes instruction. Now, this isn't to say that, if you have a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old that you can't teach them right from wrong, right? It's a matter of methodology, that when you have a toddler or a young child and they're not doing something right, the best way to discipline them is not to start by telling them that they're wrong, right? It is to approach them first in love and then advise them. And there's actually a really great hadith for this that I have here. So the Prophet ﷺ once came to a companion named Mu'adh, who was younger than the Prophet ﷺ, and listen to what the Prophet ﷺ says to him. He grabs Mu'adh, he takes Mu'adh by the hand, he holds him by his hand, and he says, "Oh Mu'adh, by Allah, I love you. So I advise you to never forget to recite after each prayer." And then he taught him this dua, Allahumma inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatika. Oh Allah, help me remember you, to be grateful of you and to worship you in excellence. So Allah starts with, the Prophet ﷺ, he starts with taking this individual by his hand. Now, if you think about it, you can't just go up to a stranger and take them by the hand, right? It's awkward. It's a bit invasive, right? If someone comes up to you and you've never met them before and they take you and they hold you, they start holding your hand, that's a weird interaction. So we know from this that the Prophet ﷺ had a relationship with Mu'adh that he had already developed. So he takes Mu'adh by the hand. And the first thing he says is, he doesn't say, "Oh Mu'adh, do this," right? He says, "Oh Mu'adh, I love you. And because I love you, I think you should do this," right? And then he teaches them this dua. Now imagine how this is going to stick in the mind of Mu'adh throughout his life, is that the Prophet ﷺ came to him and the first thing he did was express his affection for him, right? That's going to stick a lot more than, "Oh, the Prophet ﷺ told me to do this thing," right? It was out of his love for Mu'adh that he was teaching him this dua. And this dua, he's teaching him something that's ultimately going to help him in his life. It won't help the Prophet ﷺ if Mu'adh is asking, for these things. But so the Prophet ﷺ starts with love. Another thing that we have to do is, especially at this young age, is to take it, and this is the difficult thing, is to take things seriously that upset our children. I have a 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old, and sometimes, the smallest things will upset him terribly. He asked for a glass of milk and I give him a glass of milk and he starts crying because I didn't put it in the right cup, right? He wanted it in the yellow cup and I put it in the purple cup and he's having a fit. And as an adult, you think, this is so silly, just drink the milk, right? But the Prophet ﷺ, there's another wonderful story in which the Prophet ﷺ shows us that even when a child gets upset over something that we would consider to be petty, is that you should try and connect with that child. You should try and take it seriously, what that child is going through. So there's this beautiful story about this child named Abu Umair. And Abu Umair had this sparrow, this little bird that he was known to love. And he was probably about 5 or 6 years old at this time. And every day the sparrow would come by and Abu Umair would feed it and he would play with it and he would laugh with it. But one day the Prophet ﷺ came and Abu Umair was upset. And he asked Abu Umair's families, what is wrong with them? And they explained that this bird had died. So the Prophet ﷺ goes over to Abu Umair, and he gets down on his level, right? He takes a knee and he looks at him, right? He goes on his level so that they're eye to eye. And he says, "Ya Abu Umair, what has happened to your little sparrow? What is it that has happened to your little bird?" Right? You know, this is the Prophet ﷺ. He has so much to worry about, right? He has received the prophecy from Allah. You know, he has been given the instruction to guide all of humanity, right? He has to send out military expeditions. He has to look out for his people, but he's taking time out of his day to stop and talk with this little boy who's going through this rough moment. And I think, like, it would be so tempting to be like, you know what, just, you know, I understand it's your pet bird, but you know, you'll have other pets. You know, birds don't live very long, you know, essentially just get over it, right? The Prophet ﷺ doesn't do that though. He comes to this little man's level and he gives Abu Umair a chance to talk about it, right? And to share his feelings, which I think is really important. And then after those first 7 years, the Prophet ﷺ instructs us to teach them, right? And going back to the story of Mu'adh, there's a special way that we teach, right? The Prophet ﷺ started with love, right? I'm teaching you because I love these things. The Prophet ﷺ also taught, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this as well, is when he instructs us to do something, he provides us a reason for it as well, right? So when it comes to the prohibition of alcohol, Allah in the Quran says that there is some good in this, right? In alcohol, there might be some good in this substance and drinking this, but the harm far outweighs the good, right? And that's the justification that we need, is that any benefit that might come from drinking alcohol, right, is far outweighed by the inebriation, the fact that you practically lose your cognition, your ability to think properly. All of that is outweighed, right? So there are all these examples in which the Prophet ﷺ instructs his people, but he does it in a way that it makes sense, right? And this is something that we sometimes as parents, we forget. You know, we're in a hurry or whatever it is, and we say, don't do this, and then we just walk off, right? We don't provide any explanation. You know, don't put your hand on the stove, right? And it's not because, oh, it might burn you and that'll hurt you quite a bit. You know, we just give a commandment and then we keep going, right? And then finally, the Prophet ﷺ advised that in the last 7 years, so starting in their teenage years, that we advise them. And I want to go back to actually what I mentioned in the khutbah on Friday is a verse from the Bible, from the Old Testament. In the United States, there was this verse from the Old Testament that was used as justification for corporal punishment, right? Or for disciplining children with physical force, spanking them, hitting them if they got out of line. The verse is, "He who spares the rod spoils the child. He who spares the rod spoils the child." The rod is in reference to the shepherd's rod. As you know, in Allah's revelation, the shepherd is a key figure, right? You know, a lot of people were shepherds back then, and there's a lot of wisdom in the way that the shepherd kind of manages the flock, right? In a way, the Prophet ﷺ was the shepherd of our people. He was guiding us, keeping danger off of our path, right? In this case, in the Old Testament, this is used in reference to parenting, that as a father or a mother, you are the shepherd of your children. It is your job to protect them, to guide them in the right direction. This verse is used incorrectly, though. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Because a shepherd does not use the rod to beat the sheep, right? A shepherd that is hitting sheep with his rod is a bad shepherd. What the rod of the shepherd was used for is that the shepherd would move with the flock, and if the flock started to go off the path a little bit, he would take his rod and he would just put it along the side of the sheep, and he would just kind of nudge the sheep gently. And that's all it would take. And the flock would start to slowly move back onto the path. If you've ever seen videos of shepherds with dogs, sheep herding dogs will go along the periphery of the flock, and they don't bite the sheep. They'll bark a little bit, but really all they have to do is stand there and the sheep will move in a certain direction. And that's a technique of a good shepherd. A shepherd doesn't need to beat the sheep in the right direction. He simply needs to provide a little bit of guidance. So that's exactly what the Prophet ﷺ is telling us in this last part of the hadith, is that it's our job when our children are teenagers, they're still probably not going to make the best decision 100% of the time, but it's not effective for us to try and discipline them forcefully, try to yell at them, right? Anyone who's ever had teenagers knows that one of the last things that they want to do is listen to their parents. So we have to kind of, like the shepherd, just gently guide them, right? To slightly try and move them back onto the right path. And part of that is accepting that sometimes that they will wander off the path and they'll have to make their own way back when they get scared or whatever it is that they see off of the path. But this essentially, you can't have that relationship with teenagers by advising them back onto the path if you haven't built a relationship of love. So transitioning from parenting now to youth groups, one of the things that I think is really important for us as a Muslim community is we have to develop youth groups. Right now, we're really good in our community taking care of young children, doing our weekend schools or our Sunday schools all the way up to 10, 11, 12. Our kids are really well taken care of. In their teenage years, they kind of drop off. For some reason, we aren't able to maintain youth groups. The activities that we make sometimes aren't exciting. So we have to dedicate our communities to making better youth groups and making that a priority for our community. The second thing we have to do is thinking about setting up youth groups in the model of the Prophet ﷺ. So what did he do? The first thing he did was establish love and trust and confidence in his people. So I actually tell people that when you are starting a youth group or you're setting up youth programs, don't actually worry about teaching them Islam. The first thing you should do is try to build a relationship with them and let them have fun. Like if the masjid is a place of fun for them, they'll come back. And if you want to teach them Islam, you should pepper it in these conversations. You should build activities around Islam. And even if it's you have a weekly meeting, if you give them just one hadith a week and you build something fun around that hadith, it'll stick. It'll stick really well. But you have to develop that relationship. So one of the things that I do with youth groups is I spend more time getting to know the youth that are in my youth group, trying to find ways to get them to trust me, for me to show them that I'm someone safe that they can talk to. And then that allows them to not only come back to the masjid, they want to come back to the youth group, they want to be part of it, but also I've had a lot of kids reach out to me outside of youth group and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this thing in high school and I don't know what to do, right? And if they've had a great relationship with their parents, if the parents have followed the model of the Prophet ﷺ, they can also have that relationship, that conversation with their parents. What oftentimes happens is, for whatever reason, right, parents are unable to really develop that 7 years of love. It's the immigrant experience. It's the fact that, it takes so much hard work to make it in the United States. I mean, people are just working all the time. And it's really easy to make excuses to not play with your children, whatever the case may be. A lot of times teenagers don't feel comfortable telling their parents. So having a youth group director or someone, that's else that they can go to and talk to is incredibly important. And that's where I think we can move as a community, is prioritizing youth groups while also encouraging us as parents to kind of live up to this prophetic ideal, to follow the example that the Prophet ﷺ has left with us. And inshallah, that will keep our young people in the masjid. It will keep them connected to their faith. It will build better relationships between parents and their children. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he bless us, that he give us the patience and the forbearance and the strength and the knowledge that we can build these relationships, and that he bless our community.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Brother Charles. So it's very great ideas. I have a question, if you don't mind, please. So the hard stage is when the people comes teenager. So how we can treat teenagers?
Yeah, so part of it is a lot of the work has to be done early, right? You have to develop that love in the early part of their life. Really, I think the biggest advice I could give parents is when your children either do something that you don't want them to do, the first thing to do is to not freak out. That, I think it's our impulse is to yell or to discipline them. And I feel that even as a father of a 3-year-old, when they do something I don't like, the first thing I want to do is correct them, right? But going back to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and Mu'adh, the first thing he does is says, I love you, right? I love you, and then this. And I think teenagers are much more receptive if you start from a place of love. If you say something like, what you did was really upsetting to me, right? You can say that because you're establishing emotional connection. You're not just angry. You're saying, this really hurt me in a way. Asking teenagers why they do things is another one. It's like, because you have to remember, from our understanding of physiology, the human brain doesn't finish developing until the age of 25, right? That's why you can't rent a car until you're 25 years old. The car rental companies figured this out a long time ago. It's because we're still reckless up here.
That's right.
So teenagers do things that they think make sense, because they haven't developed the experience, and they don't have the wisdom yet to see all the consequences of their actions. So, approaching them with love is the first step. The second step is trying to understand why they do what they do. And that's actually a teaching process in and of itself. Okay, why did you do this? And then they have to think through it. And during that process of thinking through it, they might realize, oh, I shouldn't have done this because it had this consequence, right? And then I think taking an interest in what it is in their life. And this is really hard because teenagers you ask them how their day was, and they just, it's fine. You don't get much out of them, right?
You know what is in his mind. You do
yeah, exactly. And it means as a parent, even though we're working all day, we come home, we're tired, we have to put in just a little bit more effort to try and figure out what it is that makes that has that little spark in our teenager, right? So trying to persistently have conversations with them every day. Like, how was your day? What did you do in school, right? Like, showing an interest. Teenagers may act like that they don't want to have those conversations, but over the long term, it develops in their mind that my father or my mother actually care about my day-to-day life, right? And even if they don't want to talk about it, they know in the back of their mind that you're there, concerned about them. And if you can take an extra step, if you've got energy to take the extra step, is try and be observant about your kid. Like, with my dad, it was easy, right? I was a typical American teenager, right? I had posters in my room of, whatever it was. I was into music, right? So my dad could come in and he'd be like, oh, tell me about this band, right? And I would talk to him about the music that I listened to. And my dad played music when he was a kid. So like we had that connection, right? Yes. So if your kid's reading a book, ask them about the book that they're reading. If they're on their phone, like, don't be nosy, but kind of peek over their shoulder every once in a while and see if you can pick up on kind of what they're watching and what they're interested in. If your son is really interested in fast cars, right, there's something you can have a conversation about. But I think being persistent is the number one thing. One is, try not to overreact when they do something wrong, and then be persistent. I know it's discouraging when they don't really respond to you, but just keep asking them every day how their day was.
That's all right. All right, thank you so much, Brother Charles. So I'm going to Brother Absalam, if you have something to do, or if you have something to say.
Well, thanks you, Bilal, and thank you, Charles, for all the information you give us, and you break a lot of things down for us and for everybody who following the movie and the video, and try to get the benefit from one who was born non-Muslim and he come out to the Islam and he got a child, and now how he looked to raise the child. If you compare yourself, to your dad, what's the difference between your caring about your kids and this age, and was the thing your dad was thinking at that time? Is there any difference between you and your dad? That was my question, just to compare the things like this.
Good question.
Between me and my father?
Yes.
My father and I had a very, very strong relationship, and now I look back at it as a parent. There are a couple of times I think my dad was pretty reckless. He was he let me have too much freedom. For example, when I was 10 years old, my father bought me a machete so that I could go play in the woods and I could cut up trees and make forts and stuff. I would never give my 10-year-old a machete. That's crazy. But for some reason, my dad thought it was a good idea. It was a different generation, right? You could get away with that stuff. But yeah, one thing is, my father modeled a certain type of behavior that, and maybe when I was a teenager, I wasn't this enthralled with it. My father's passed away, so I think when your parents pass away, you always tend to think of them much more highly than when they're there. You just appreciate them more. But my father never really got too upset with me. And I said in the khutbah the other day, if my father was upset, he never hit me, he never yelled at me. All he had to do was say is, "I'm disappointed in you." And that was it. I mean, it cut through me like a knife. And it's because, I knew my father loved me. And, for most of my life, he was the number one person that I wanted to be happy with me. As Muslims, we want Allah to be happy with us. But when you're a kid, you want your parents to be happy with you. And you want to do whatever you can to make them happy. So my father gave me freedom to make my own decisions, perhaps a little too much. He encouraged me in the things that I wanted to do. So I was into music when I was a kid. So he let me play music. He let me be a part of the band in school and things like that. And one thing that my father did, and I'm picking up on this now. My father was older when I was born. He was about 40. And he had this way of being present in my life without constantly being there. So a good example is, I used to go to the skating rink on Friday nights every night. Everybody in town went to the skating rink in Petersburg. I don't think it's there anymore, but, and at first my father would hang out in the like the snack bar, and he would read the newspaper or whatever. And then one day he started working. He just got up and decided he was going to work in the snack bar. So he just went behind the counter and started making drinks. He wasn't getting paid or anything. He's just a good guy that wanted to help out. We knew the people that owned the skating rink. It never occurred to me that my father was there every night that I was there. I was there hanging out with my friends, having a good time. And my father was there looking after me the whole time. And I had no idea that he was there. But I could always go to him, if I wanted a drink or I wanted some fries from the snack bar. Like, my dad was always there for me to go back to. And isn't that what children do? Like toddlers, toddlers will, if you're in a room somewhere, toddlers will move away and they'll go and explore things, but they always run back to their mom or their dad's leg, right? And really, I did that with my dad throughout my whole life because he was always there. And that really, when in my 20s, as I was trying to figure out life, what I was going to do and everything, my dad was always an open ear. He was always, what do you think about doing this? Or what do you think about, he always bounced all these ideas off of me. And even if I had a crazy idea, he would entertain it, which, it's nice when you have a parent or a friend that doesn't tell you your ideas are stupid.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's part of another question. I seek to see your opinion or idea about the parent. When both of the parent they have a full-time job, will they have their kids, like you say, teenager or maybe 6, 7, they put them in a daycare. We're talking about the Muslims families. They get the kids at the daycare. A daycare, over here is not a Muslim daycare or the mosque or anything. It's not all the places around we live, the Muslims. There is the mosque or the masjid. Probably it could be a far away. And this parent, when some of them, they work 12 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day. And the kids, someone else raised their kids with a different culture, different ideas, different how they see the life. I want you to give us something, what you can say to the parents who looking only for the money to be rich or spend a lot of time at their job. Will they have a family?
Yes, it's a big problem. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something I think everyone faces. We don't live in an America where one parent can go work a job and the other parent can stay home with the children. That, for most people, that's not the case because life is too expensive. So oftentimes both parents are working, and we send our son to daycare, and alhamdulillah, I have a little bit of a flexible schedule so I can spend time with him in the morning. But yeah, as soon as we pick him up at 6 o'clock every evening, we've got to feed him and we've got to get him ready for bed. There's not a lot of time. And then at the end of the day, we're all tired, right? We've been working really hard throughout the day. If our kid is grumpy, we don't have a ton of patience because we're tired. It's very difficult. So I think at a certain point, you just have to, there's two things that I think are important. One is, if you can't spend a quantity of time, a lot of time with your kids, then the little time that you have should be quality time, right? So that's, one of the things that we do is, we end up picking our son up at 5:30 or 6 every day. And because it's summertime, we'll take him to a playground for an hour. It's really tempting to just sit on the bench and let our kid go play. But my wife and I making an effort to the best of our ability to be on the playground, playing with our son, picking him up and putting him on things and going down the slide with him. And even though we're exhausted, at a certain point, you just accept that you're going to be exhausted for the rest of your life, right? That's just the way life is going to be. So you might as well be exhausted playing with your kid and developing that relationship. But the little time that you have with your children, make sure that you're actually engaged with them. So if your kid is sit down coloring, like take a page out of their coloring book, sit right next to them and color with them, right? That's all you have to do. Try not to sit on the sidelines. Try not to use your phone or anything to distract kids. I know that's really tempting, and my wife and I, we fall into this sometimes, but really try and be present with your children to the amount that you can. Another thing I think is important talking about daycare, and we've had some conversations about this, is most of the daycares in the area are not run by Muslims, and they're not, kind of rooted in the Islamic tradition. Try and find a daycare that is at least accepting of diversity, right? So our daycare, they're really interested in Musa, who, my son, he's half Pakistani. They want to know about Pakistan. They want to know about his culture. They want to teach him parts of his culture. That's great. If you can find a daycare or someone that is willing to kind of embrace cultural diversity, that's good. But also, there are certain things that, there are certain ideas and things that are out in society right now that parents are going to have to think about. Especially when kids are in their teenage years, they're seeing things and they're being taught things in school that are foreign to kind of the Islamic way of life. And it's our tendency to kind of freak out when we hear about LGBTQ issues or, homosexuality and things like that. I think as parents and as adults, we need to kind of educate ourselves and really as a community, we need to figure out how to have productive conversations about these topics, because it's not easy. You can tell your teenager or whatever, don't do this, right? But it's not going to be effective. And I think this is something that we need to work on, that we haven't quite figured out, is how do we have these tough conversations in a way that teaches our kids the difference between right and wrong, while at the same time, not forcing them or trying to discipline them into the right way of thinking.
Yeah, thank you, Charles, because the way you say no, if I can't talk to you like I talk to my son, I have a son, he's 16 years old, and we try our best, my life is based on one thing, thanks to the wife, she's very caring about them, she's very watching them closely, she's anything happens, big or small thing, she's there. Even the hadith and the Holy Quran, she's the one who spend a lot of time with them to they recite and they memorize the Holy Quran and hadith. Even in the morning time when they get up, she will call them, did you say your dhikr this morning? أصبحنا وأصبح الملك لله. Even before Maghrib, you say there is dhikr. She's very closely. I don't do as much as what she do, because it's a huge difference between me and her. But one thing I want to say, because we have this program and the message for the youth, but we never started before. We bring a speaker from other masajid, from other places to come over here. We have a weekend day. We do this on Saturdays. Mm-hmm. Someone coming from far away, when he come, if I do give the speech, see a lot of kids, no one pay attention to me, no one will listen to me, because they get used to me. Get used to me, they don't want it. But when we bring someone from a different place, you see, their eyes and their ears they are open and listen. I did ask the community to pick one of our youth for at least once a month. We give him the topic. We do the casting with him. We see before prior the speech, day or 2 days, we listen to him. We correct if there is a hadith or Holy Quran, and just to get the kids to be just like the one who will make a da'wah, or the one who will make it. This, we give the kids a more time for search for the topic, and you give, just like a challenge, just like this. But that program, we didn't put it in the work yet. We still waiting for the people to work on that. But the things I said, when it comes to what you choose, how you choose to get your kids, give them good education, give them good, and same time to be a good Muslims as what you like to be them. Because there is a verse on this ayah on Quran Kareem, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. All who you believe, seek protection for yourself and your family. And this, you have to build something strong, especially like you said, 7 days, 7 years, the 7 years. The 7 years you have to pass all the knowledge, all what do you know and your past, what do you mistake. You've done the mistakes before. You don't want your child to do the same mistake, because the same mistake, it will give you the same result. You don't want to see it repeated over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's, I always told the Muslims who live around, get some times and bring your kids to the masjid. Believe me, when you bring them to the masjid, you get them out from all the electronic stuff on the phone, on the computer. Get them over there. Sometimes that's from my own experience. My son will tell me, let's go to the masjid. Sometimes, I'm this, I get this, but you feel like lazy, like you don't want to go. But as soon as you get him in, it's just like a full charge. It's got plenty of energy to go and keep going. And that's why we have to have a way to get them to the masjid. And you took them to the masjid right now, even if, like you said, if it is not, they're not going to learn anything. Even the hadith, will listen, because the kids, they might listen one thanks, but it's not going to get to them after 2-3 days. Then he will say, oh, that man said one this and this and this. Then but you have to be able always to explain to him what is it. And the first things what we have to do, you have to educate ourselves. You have to have something to give. If you don't have it, you cannot give it. The parent should spend some time to invest in their child, you know, to invest. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already say in one of surah, if you're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ عِندَكَ الْكِبَرُ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا فَلَا تَقُل لَّهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا وَقُل لَّهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا وَاخْفَضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ وَقُل رَّبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command us to take care of our parents, to obey them, to open our wings for them, to protect them, to give them anything what they want. That's the parent. But if my dad, he never make effort, or my mom never make effort to teach me, to show me, to make me as the Muslim, as a good Muslim, I don't know nothing about this. Probably will get to the age, the 40s or 50s, then I try to figure out, you know. The main things is fresh. The kids are just like a tree. You want to plant a tree, you have to water the tree. You have to clean it from time to time. Even sometimes you have to trim it. You know, if you don't trim it, what's going to happen? Yeah. All the branches going all different ways. It's not going to be. It's not a nice looking tree. And that's the parent. You have to spend some time and to teach your kids, because not all education outside is going to be able. You should not be proud of your son because he got the degrees, he got a master, he got this and get this, and his character is not a Muslim character. What's kind of benefit this one? The life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at you, how you look, or what you dress, and who you are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala look at you, at our heart. And this heart we should to work for. The heart, if it's the food of the iman, for the belief of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and following the direction, the light. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya wa aminu billahi wa rasulihi wa nuri alladhi anzalna. Believe in Allah and believe in His messenger and believe in the light we have sent it to you. That's our following. Believe me, a lot of the people, they looking how to be rich, to build a house and other house, luxury things, go this. No, this is not the main things. You did not create it. Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we have to benefit from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us. You know, من الطيبات, يعني Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala تمتعوا بالطيبات. All things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us, we have to use it for our benefit, for this. We have to enjoy it, but it's not enjoy things and forget the main things. It's our relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With this relation, we want the same thing for our kids. Our kids should be like Charles, you say you're always looking at your dad, especially at that time. Your daddy was the best example for you. Whatever he do, you try to copy him. You know, you think he is the best one in the world. The man who knows everything, and that's how. If he do a good things, you know you will copy him doing a good things. If you doing a bad things, you know you're gonna do a bad things. This is best example. We have to be the best example for our kids. And the best example, we have to show them the care. Caring about your kids is not because just you're talking. Just you give him whatever you want. Sometimes the parent, whatever the kid want, they just hand it to him. easily. I'm happy. He wanted Snickers. Snickers cost about $140, $200. He said, yeah, I do to my son. That is not the way how the caring. The caring is not feeding him or make his stomach is full and his head is empty. Our job, our responsibilities to make his brain bigger, to extend the brain with the knowledge. The knowledge can help him here in the dunya and hereafter. I know later on, brother Bilal or brother Charles, you want to be proud of your child. If your child does something good, everybody like you'll be proud of him. But if your son is criminal or do things, you try to hide. It is good now. Spend some time with your kids right now. You will see a big and a huge difference later on. Even like you say, the youth, now when you see them going out and coming in from the right path, just be patient. And end of the road, they will come back to the right things because you give them a good stand. And that's what we want the Muslims, spend some time teaching them the deen, even compare other religions, other beliefs, and who we are, what's our response, what the purpose of us being in this life, and see the blessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us with all this blessing. And this blessing, we should be thankful. And we always told them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. When you thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you more. All things you have now is not because I want home, I want to work earlier, work hard, and come and bring it to you. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want to stop it, He will stop it. But everything we got is from Him. If we don't have it, that means we have to work. We have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give it us. And we gotta give them the yaqeen, or this is the yaqeen is everything we have is from Him. It's from Him alone. And that's why we have to take him to the masajid. We have to look for the parent. As my opinion, the one person, if you got a mother and the father, I prefer one of them working a full time and one of them working a part time, because the other, if you work 8 hours, you work 4 hours, and other 4 hours you give it to your kids. Believe me, you will later on, you will be thankful because you give some time to your kids. You will see them close to you, caring about you. And this is something, if you didn't work on it right now, later on you will feel sorry. But like we said, the time, you cannot roll back time about 5, 6 years, 10 or 20 back to correct the mistake. If it's happened, it's no turn. It's keep going. And thank you so much for listening to me. That's my opinion.
Thanks, brother Absalam. I know it's a big and large topic. We can't cover it in a couple minutes. It's big topic, and we need more time. So I want to thank you, brother Absalam, also brother Charles. I'm gonna just add some couple ideas. Our kids, we want to say, our kids is our project in judgment. So our kids is like a project. You're working in projects. You build your projects in judgment. You have to take care of your children, especially nowadays. They are around about lot of technology, phones, internet, computers, PlayStation, all of this stuff infect their brain. So if you don't care about your child, they're gonna follow a wrong way. So please take care of your children and bring them to the masjid and follow what brother Charles say and follow what brother Absalam say. So if anything to say, again, we are going to close this halaqah, and we are going to thank brother Charles for enjoying us, and we hope to see you again with us, Brother Charles. And if you don't mind, Brother Absalam, if you can make a little bit dua to close this حلقة, please.
إن شاء الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك وأنت أهل من السؤال ونرجوك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافينا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت إنك تقضي بالحق ولا يقضى عليك. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم نور طريقنا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم أصلح لنا ذريتنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم أصلح لنا أزواجنا وذريتنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم ارحم آباءنا وأمهاتنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم قوي إيماننا يا رب العالمين. اللهم نقي قلوبنا من الدنس كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. واللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. وسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. We are going to see you, Brother Charles, again. Hope to see you again with us in another حلقة inshallah. Thank you, Brother Absalam. Thank you, everyone. See you again. Thank you.
جزاك الله خير brother.